Okay, let's go back to our index page. We remember in our style, we've stylized basic HTML pieces like the body, the H1s, the H2s. We've stylized list items and paragraphs. What we haven't stylized is our IDs. So you probably wondered a week or two ago why I was making you do these horrible things called divs. What did it matter? Why did we have to put things into this clear bin and put a label on the outside that said header? Why did we have to put another clear bin inside of that and put a label on that that said site branding? What was the point? Well, now you're going to find out the point. We are going to start stylizing these different IDs inside of our divs. Before we move on, the one thing that Bubble Under does not have is a footer, and I don't know why, and it really should, so we can stylize our footer as well. So on your index page, I'd like you to add, and keep in mind that this is before the body ends. Whoops, this is actually in the wrong spot. Let me move this quickly and I'll explain. Okay, so in our body, which is everything we see on the web page, it starts up here. It has our header, it has our navigation, it has our body content, and it has our footer, and then the body closes. Within that, the body content div has to close out before we start our footer. That's why I moved that up, if you're wondering what I just did. So after your closing div that closes your body content, right now you don't have any of this code on your page. I want you to add this, however. So I want you to add a div with the ID equals footer, and then remember to close out the div. And if you want to put a comment reminding yourself of what div specifically is closing here, like I did, you can say this is the end of the footer div. Inside your footer, I want you to do a paragraph, opening and closing p tags, and I want you to write out the word copyright and then include the code that makes the copyright symbol. It's ampersand, COPY, semicolon. So copyright, the copyright symbol 2020, comma, bubble under dive club, end paragraph. So once you add this footer and save the file, this should show up on your actual view in Chrome. Copyright, copyright symbol, bubble under dive club. Once you have proof that that works, you can see that everything's looking good. Take that code and copy it and paste it in all 3 pages. So we need to paste it in our about and our contact. So I'm copying that. I'm going to the about page, going down to the bottom. After the body closes, the body content div, sorry, but before the body closes, because that's everything we see. So right here is where you want to paste in that footer. So the body content div closes, we add our footer, and then the body and the HTML close. And save that page, and then go to your contact page and do the same thing. After the body content div closes, paste in your footer before the body closes and save that. And if all that worked, back in your browser, I'm going to refresh. I see the footer on my home page. I see the footer on my about page. And I see the footer on my Contact Us page. So it was successful. So make sure you add the footer. And once you've done that successfully, we're going to go back to our style sheet and we're going to start telling how the footer should look, how the body content should look, how the navigation should look, how the tagline, site branding, and header should look. Those are all IDs that we've assigned, and now we can give them special rules, and it will stylize our page and make it look even better. All right, the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to stylize this line right here, Diving Club for the Southwest of UK. Actually, Doesn't matter what page we're on because our header is the same on all 3 pages. Here's our header. We have site branding, bubble under, and we have tagline, the diving club. Our header is the exact same on all 3 pages. So how do we change? We want this to look different, but we want it to look different on all 3 pages. So we could go in here and do an inline style and tell this P to be boldened pink, let's just say. But we'd have to do that on all 3 pages in this same spot. And a 3-page website is pretty rare. Most web pages or websites are, 10, 20, 30, 500 pages. So you clearly don't want to do it that way. What we can do in our style sheet, in our CSS, is we can do a special type of naming where we say inside the tagline, anything that's a P should look this way. Not a P anywhere else on our page, like down here. Specifically, the paragraphs inside of the ID called tagline should look a certain way. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to pop back Diving Club for the Southwest. I'm going to pop back to our view, which is not that. Bubble under, there we go. So it's this line right here. This is the tagline, Diving Club for the Southwest. So that's what we're going to tweak in our CSS. So go to your CSS file and we're going to scroll down. By the way, the order of these doesn't matter, but if you're writing a style sheet or you're going back to troubleshoot it, usually we start with the big categories first, the main things like the bodies, the H1s, H2s, the list items, and the paragraphs. Then we get down here and we start doing more specific things. And this is where these IDs that we've done so far in our HTML, an ID called site branding, this is where that comes into play, or an ID called tagline. That's the one we're going to tweak. So in your style sheet down here, to call up an ID, we need to use the hashtag sign and then the name of it. So hashtag tagline. That was the ID called tagline that we set up already. And more specifically, we want to target the paragraphs inside of the tagline. So we do 2 rules, the tagline ID and the paragraphs inside only. Curly brace, enter, enter, closing curly brace. The rule for paragraphs inside the tagline ID is going to be font style of italic, semicolon. And then the second rule is going to be that the font family, colon, is going to be our first choice is Georgia, comma, our second choice is Times, comma, and if it doesn't have any of those, just go with a serif font. That's the ones that have the little feet, the little slabs at the bottom. End that with a semicolon. So this is specifically the paragraphs inside of the IDs of tagline should look different. Let's save our CSS. I'm going to go to our page, and it's this part right here that's going to change when I hit refresh. There it is. That's a completely different font and it's italicized. Notice it didn't affect the paragraphs elsewhere on the page, only the P inside of the ID called tagline. And it did it on all 3 pages with 1 line of code in our external sheet. Okay. All right, that worked. It's always good when things work. Oop. That's my alarm to remind me that I have to do a live chat in a class. So I'm going to hit pause and I'll be right back with you. All right, and just like that, thanks to the magic of the pause button, I am back. We're going to continue making some contextual selectors, meaning selecting something within the context of something else. So we stylize the paragraphs in our tagline. What we're now going to do is stylize the anchors in our navigation. So if we pop back here and we look at our navigation section, which is right here, Anytime we have an A or an anchor, these are our hyperlinks. We're taking the word home and we're hyperlinking it to the index.html page. We're taking the word about and we're hyperlinking it to the about page. And as a reminder of how this actually looks, hyperlinks by default are underlined. And that's how we know that they're a hyperlink. We also know because when we hover over a word, the little hand shows up. So what if we don't want those underlines? What if that bothers us? That's the default behavior. So what we have to do in our CSS is write some code that tells it not to underline or not to behave that way, but only in our navigation. So we're going to come down here and we're going to target our navigation ID first, and we're going to target the A's, the anchors within our navigation only. So curly brace, return a few lines, close your curly brace. The rule for all anchors in the navigation area, the div called navigation, is going to be text hyphen decoration and colon and none, meaning don't underline it. That's the norm. So anchors in our navigation should not have any text decoration. We're going to save this CSS, go back to our page, and when we refresh, these underlines should go away. And I hit refresh and they went away. They're still a hyperlink. I still get the little hand when I hover over them, and they still work as a hyperlink, but they no longer have the text decoration or the underlining. And that's what we wanted to achieve. So we have one rule for that. Perfect. Let's move on. The next rule that we want to do is we want to talk about how the paragraphs in our footer look. So if I go to our page, right now a paragraph in my footer looks the exact same as a paragraph anywhere else because it's coded with a P. An index page, if I look down here, my footer is coded with a P, so it looks exactly like every other P on this page, every other paragraph. So in our style, we want to target the footer, so hashtag footer, and specifically the paragraphs within the footer. Curly brace, close the curly brace. The rule that we want for paragraphs within the footer only is line height of 150%, semicolon. And since we don't have two lines, we're not going to see that. We're going to have to add more lines to see how it spaced that out. But what we could do was we could go back and we could do, sorry, flipping around here. I want something that we're actually going to be able to see. Oh, we are going to do font size of small. So font size, whoops, I forgot to hit enter to get that to autofill, small. So this one we should see. If we had more lines in our footer, we would see the line spacing show up. So save your CSS, go to the view. So this is where we're going to see a change, unless it's already small. This might not do anything. No, it didn't. Our type is already set to be small. So let's go back to our CSS and let's do something else that we can do to it. How about let's add one that we can actually see. Font style, and we'll do italic. Finish that with a semicolon. And save our CSS. And go back to our view. So this now should turn italicized. There we go. So it's small, but it was small already because all paragraphs are small, so that didn't change. We only have one line, so we can't see our line spacing, but we do finally see the result of telling the paragraph in the footer only to be italicized. So that finally worked. Let's go back to our index page. And let's add something to our footer so that we actually see more line spacing. So we have one paragraph in our footer right now. Let's add a second one with additional content so we can see how line spacing works, period. And I'm going to duplicate that line, copy it, I'm going to paste it again. So all I did was add 3 paragraphs to our footer. 3 individual paragraphs that close out. Whoops, look at that, I didn't close it out. \P. I wonder how I missed that. \P. There we go. I'm going to save this. This is my index page only that I did this test on. And I'm going to view the index page. There we go. Because I did line spacing at 150% or 1.5 line spacing, I can see in my view that I have this extra spacing here. If I didn't have that, it would be this 100%. The next paragraph would have a little bit of space, but not this extra space. So now at least we can see how that works in the footer only. Let's bump back over here. All right, a couple more rules we're going to add to this before we're done. We want to stylize all of our heading 1, 2, and 3s to be a certain font family, to have a background of navy and a text color of white. And we already have a rule for our heading 1 and our heading 2. But these rules are going to be for all 3 of them, heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3. And so instead of adding these new rules to the heading 1 and to the heading 2, we're just going to add a group rule. So down here we're going to say H1, comma, H2, comma, H3. Curly brace, return, return, end curly brace. What this means is that the rules that I write in between the curly braces are going to apply to the heading 1s, heading 2s, and heading 3s. I just don't have to type it different times. So we're going to say font family. I want all of my heading 1, 2s, and 3s to be quote, trebuchet, I gotta spell it right though, TREBUSCHETMS, because it's a 2-word font, we have to put it in quotes. That's my first choice, so I separate with commas. If not that, Helvetica, comma. If you don't have Helvetica, use Arial. And if, whoops, comma. And if you don't have any of those, use your generic sans serif. So that's my first rule. I end it with a semicolon. The background color that I want to use for all my heading 1, 2s, and 3s is navy, semicolon. And the color, which is actually the font color that I want to use for all of these, is white. So here's the rule for our heading 1, 2, and 3. Let's save our CSS, jump to, whoops, I want to go down to our view, and I'm going to refresh. Notice that it applied the rule. It now has a navy background color, a white type color, and it's in Trebuchet MS first, or Helvetical, or Arial. So that worked for all of them. Notice how really tight this is. That's something that you would clean up. You wouldn't have your words right up against the edge here. But in general, this applied on all 3 pages. The H1, H2, or H3 has been stylized this way. So if you ever are writing rules that apply to multiple things, as long as you separate them by commas here before you write your rules, that will work perfectly. Okay, something to think about is which rule wins. So a heading 1, we've already told it to be that same font stack, that's fine, but we didn't say anything about color or background color. But in our heading 2, we did tell it to be blue, the text color to be blue. But later on, when we wrote this rule, we said it should be white. Which one wins? Well, you can see from our page that the white rule 1. And the reason that it won is simple. It comes at the end. Code starts at the top of the page and applies the rule. So when it hits this point of reading the code, it says the color of H2s, the text color should be blue. But when it gets down here, it sees that the color should be white. That's the one that it changes it to, and that's the one that wins. So as long as it doesn't get changed further down here, if later on I have an H2 that says yellow, that's the one that's going to win. It's literally just reading the type top to bottom. So keep that in mind as well. Whatever rule you have here lower on your page is going to be the rule that wins. All right, the other thing that I want to do is I want to add a rule about our anchors in general. We don't have any A rules. We have some specific to the ones that are in navigation, but we want to talk about anytime we have an anchor, an A tag being used on our page, how we want that to handle. Basic rules at the top of the page and the specific ones that deal with classes or IDs down here. So we're going to write a rule for our anchors and put the rule inside the curly braces. Anytime we have something hyperlinked with an anchor tag, the font weight that we want to use is bold, and the color of those, the text color, should be black. So font weight bold, semicolon, color, colon, black, semicolon. Do a save, and let's go to a page and do a refresh. I think on our contact page, yep, on our contact page we had an anchor for our hyperlink to the email to Bob. So that is now showing up as being bold and black. Notice this still has the underlining like hyperlinks are expected, but we don't up in our navigation. And that's because very specifically in our style, we only use that rule of no text decoration in our anchors in the navigation specifically. Elsewhere on the page, they're going to be underlined as we expect them to be. All right, one last thing that we're going to do. Actually, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. So that's it. I'm going to stop right here with this lesson. And this is a basic external style sheet. The key to this is it has to be named .css. And when you write this, you don't need to start with any tags. We don't need that style tag. It knows it's a style because of the CSS. This comment at the top is just the human words reminding us what it is. But we start with a selector and we put the rules for it within curly braces. Remember that if you're working in Notepad++, things are going to light up if they're done correctly. So the declaration here is going to be in light blue. And remember to end every rule line with a semicolon. And remember to close out with curly braces. Open curly brace, closing curly brace. The other thing I want to show you is how to validate this. So if you do a Google search for a CSS validator, this W3 markup is the one that we've used before, and we're going to click on that. It's named a little bit differently. It's called Jigsaw. Notice up here it says CSS validation. The other one that we use is HTML. So if you're trying to validate CSS, make sure you upload it to the CSS version. So file upload, I'm going to choose the file that we've been working on. And in my bubble under, it's called style.css. I'm going to open that and run it through. Yay, congratulations, no errors found. That is the best thing that you ever want to see. And then remember that HTML validator is a different page. It looks very similar, but it says markup HTML, whereas the CSS page says CSS right here. So if you want to validate your HTML pages, but this one, well, I know it can't be. That's because we need to go here. Upload upload your file. Let's upload the index page. Check it. I have a bogus comment. End of site. Bogus comment. So I'm not too worried that I'm getting errors with the fact that I have a capital letter E on my comment, and it's not mappable to XML. I'm not worried about that either due to this trailing hyphen. So I guess if I took that out, it would be mappable. So none of these are going to stop anything from working, but evidently if I take out these hyphens inside of my comments, things are going to work better. So again, check your files. If you have issues and you don't troubleshoot it with the HTML or the CSS validator first, I need you to do that first before you reach out to me, because this is going to point out issues that you do have. All right, that's the end of the CSS speech.